everyone, welcome back to GMAT Friday. Today we are going to solve a reading comprehension that comprises of 3 questions. This is a general studies passage and it is ranked at a 605 plus level. That means it's a moderate passage, not very typical. There are 3 more types of passages which are there on your GMAT. You have history passages, you have science passages and you have business and commerce passages. All these 3 types have been discussed in our previous videos, so do check them out. Now without any further ado, let's get into solving this particular passage. Now as always, you have to strategically pause this video so that you are able to read the passage and solve all the 3 questions one by one. And once you are done solving all the 3 questions, I would like you to resume to have a look at the solution. Okay guys, now let's have a look at the passage first before we dive into the questions. What does the passage say? Biofuels blended with ordinary fuel are beginning to bring these green alternatives from obscurity. Now what do we mean by obscurity? Obscurity means that these were things which were hidden or they were not that well known or not that popular. So what is happening? Biofuels are beginning to bring the green alternatives into more popularity. Brazil has for many years produced ethanol from sugar and used the high octane alcohol as a substitute for gasoline. So Brazil has been doing a similar thing from some time now. Vegetable oil derived from soya beans and rapeseed called canola in Americas has been used to run tractors in many parts of the world. So all of these are things which were already happening in some parts of the world, but these environmental alternatives to crude oil have not recently been taken very seriously by the big consumer nations and their petro corporations. So, although this was happening at some smaller scale in parts of the world individually, it was not taken very seriously until or up till now by bigger nations or by bigger corporations. But, so whenever we have a contrast word, there is something important. The argument of the author shifts here. So now the author is trying to tell us that the new laws which require gasoline to contain 10% ethanol and diesel to contain 6% vegetable oil by volume are changing all that. So what is being changed? That these things are now starting to be taken seriously by the consumer nations and the corporations. At the levels imposed, no new infrastructure. So the author is now trying to explain that, okay, why is this looking attractive or lucrative to the corporations? At the levels which are being imposed, that is this 10% ethanol and 6% vegetable oil, no new infrastructure is required in order to accommodate these changes, as they can be dispensed at the existing fuel stations and used to run existing cars, trucks and tractors. So they are saying that at the changes which are being proposed, it is easily accommodatable. So it is definitely a easier step to take. To go further, however, for example, run all the cars exclusively on ethanol would require a new generation of engine, and more significantly, we will have to scale up the production of ethanol by a fantastic margin. Means if we try to drastically change the policies or drastically change the source of fuel, then the changes would be more expensive. The changes would be more, resource extensive to implement. A whole scale switch to biodiesel seems to carry fewer challenges. So if there is a switch to biodiesel, then that means a mix of the original fuel and the newer fuel, that will have fewer challenges. Its production is far less capital intensive in the start. Most existing engines can burn the fuel or would be relatively easy to convert, and farmers are very receptive to the idea of this new market that they will get for a product that they are actually growing, that is ethanol. So the author is trying to tell us that instead of switching completely to biodegradable fuel, if we switch to biofuels, so the author is actually talking about biofuels. So we can say that the topic of our passage is biofuels and the impact of biofuels. So instead of switching completely to biodegradable fuels like ethanol or completely to vegetable oil, if we switch to biofuels, which is a combination of those normal fuels and ethanol or vegetable oil, then it would be a better decision. So the author is telling us that the new laws which are coming up are also favoring this, and how this is a good decision to take instead of switching completely. So that is what our passage is talking about. Okay guys, now let's have a look at the first question. What is the question saying? Which of the following sentences best expresses the key point made in the passage? So what do we mean by key point? Key point means the main point, or in other words, they are hinting at what is the primary purpose of the author behind writing this passage. So this is just one way of asking the same question, whether it's main point, key point, primary purpose, it's more or less the same. So what do we have to go for? We have to go for the crux of the passage, or the main motive of the author behind writing this passage. So now let's have a look at the options. The first option says, as oil prices rise, policy makers are turning to alternatives. Yes, policy makers are turning to alternatives. That is what is written in the passage, but the reason is not given in the passage. So we cannot infer that because the prices are rising, that is why they are looking for alternatives. The author does not talk about price rise anywhere in the passage. So we can eliminate option A. We can never go for an answer which is not mentioned or the information is not written in the passage, that we can surely eliminate. Let's look at B. B says, new laws are beginning to lift biofuels from obscurity. Yes, we read about obscurity in the passage, and we read that the new laws are what? They are changing all that. They are changing what? They are changing the uninterestedness of the big consumer nations and the petro corporations. Means the new laws are actually bringing attention to the biofuels. Yes, that is what the passage is talking about. So let's hold on to B. Moving on towards the next choice, C. Blending biofuels with traditional oil products. We were talking about blending fuels with fuel, not oil products. What products are we talking about actually? We were talking about biofuels being blended with fuels and not any oil product. So, we can eliminate C. C is not factually correct. D says biofuels are about to take off. See, biofuels have just been risen from obscurity. They are beginning to become popular. But take off would be what? Take off would be something that is too extreme, and we know that on the GMAT we try to avoid options which are too extreme. So biofuels are definitely becoming popular, but whether they are about to take off would be too extreme a statement to make. And finally E says, at the level imposed, no new infrastructure is required to accommodate the emergence of biofuels. Yes, this is correct. This is a correct information according to what is written in the passage, but this is not your main point, or this is not your crux of the passage. It is only a part of the passage. So, out of E and B, I will definitely go for B, and B is the correct choice. Moving on to question number 2. What does question number 2 say? Which of the following sentences would best conclude the passage? So we have to look for the conclusion of the passage. So this, in other words, is a CR question in an RC. You will also sometimes see that when you have a CR question in an RC, it means that you are at a good level in the paper, or you are doing relatively well on the paper when you start to spot CR questions on RC. Now, let's see what are the options. So, we have to look for a statement which would conclude what the passage is saying. Let's have a look at A. Perhaps the greatest appeal of both biodiesel and ethanol is the promise, okay, for any country with the space to grow biofuel producing crops is independence from imported fuels and increased agricultural revenue. Okay. So, what is the appeal of biodiesel and ethanol? That the country would become free from imported fuels and increased agricultural revenue. Now, we know that towards the end we talked about a new market for the farmers because they were already growing or producing ethanol. So, definitely there will be an increased agricultural revenue that is going to happen. And we also know that these levels of changes which are being proposed, they will not need any new infrastructure. Okay. And the existing engines would be able to utilize this combination of biofuel. So definitely then the country would have to import less fuel from outside. So yes, it would become free from importing fuels. So A looks like a very strong contender for our right answer. Let's hold on to A. Let's have a look at B. Fear of global warming is partly driving this search for off-the-wall alternatives. Again, these alternatives are not off the wall. Off the wall would mean very unique or something which is entirely different, because we were talking about ethanol which is already being produced by farmers. So it's not off the wall exactly. And nowhere did we talk about global warming. So we can eliminate B option. Let's have a look at C. C says skeptics argue that growing crops to produce ethanol will consume more gasoline than it will produce. Okay. Nowhere has the passage discussed that how are we going to produce ethanol and what is going to be consumed in producing ethanol. This is something which is not mentioned in the passage. It's a totally out of scope option. Let's have a look at D. D says if biofuels do take off, environmentalists will raise as many concerns as they do currently. Again, this is just conjecture, or this is just, you can say, a guess which the author is taking when he is listing the options. It's not something that is mentioned in the options, in the passage. It nowhere talks about environmentalists raising concerns for biofuels. So currently, out of scope again. Let's have a look at the last one, E, which says perhaps the greatest appeal of biofuels is the opportunity they represent for venture capitalists. Again, greatest is a word which is too extreme, and venture capitalists, not something we have discussed in the passage, to break into the highly profitable but closed oil market. We never talked about the oil market being closed. So most of the options here you can see are options which are talking about things which have not been mentioned in the passage. And a conclusion can never be information which is additional. A conclusion will always be information that has already been mentioned in the passage, and the author will just conclude whatever he has written. So, safely we can mark A as the correct choice. Okay guys, now let's have a look at the third question. What is the question saying? It can be inferred from the passage that. It's an inference question. In an inference question, we have to only select as the right answer the information that is 100% inferable or 100% true based on what is given in the passage. So, in RC or even in CR, I can basically translate infer to 100% true. Inference means something which is 100% true based on what is given to us. So let's have a look at the options. What does A say? Most cars would run on a fuel blend made up of 85% ethanol. Okay. We know that we will mix 10% ethanol in the existing fuel. How can we conclude that they would run on 85% blend? And most cars, again, there are many red flags in option A. So we can easily eliminate A. Let's have a look at B. B says government policy is lifting biofuels from obscurity. Yes, the laws that the government are making is lifting the biofuels and they are coming out of obscurity. Yes, this is the central theme of the passage. B is a strong contender. Let's hold on to B. C says demand for biofuels will soon outstrip supply. How do we know this? This is a prediction which we cannot make on the basis of the information that is given in the passage. Rule this out. D. Cars can handle a 10% ethanol blend. Now this is a trap or this is a tricky option. We know that in the current fuel we are going to blend 10% ethanol, and they are saying that the existing cars would be able to run on it and the existing fuel stations which are used in the cars are compatible to it. But have we actually experimented or is there any proof of this in the passage? No. This is just conjecture which they are making while they have passed these laws. So this is not inferable from the passage. This may or may not be true. We do not have any evidence of this in the passage. So we can rule out D. E says biofuels are not the only alternative. We never talk about other alternatives. We are only talking about biofuels to the current situation of imported crude products. So eliminate E and B will be the correct choice. So we can safely mark B as the correct answer for the third question. So that's from my side, guys. If you want me to discuss more such passages with more questions, comment down below. If you like my content, please hit the like button and keep studying for the GMAT.